opportunity zones created by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. So that's the last major tax bill that was passed by Congress in December of 2017. As Steve said, these are geographic regions within each state where equity investments into businesses or properties are incentivized by deferring the tax on previously earned capital gains. So there are people in this economy who've already have capital gains, and they don't want to pay tax on that capital gains right now. So if they invest their money into a qualified opportunity fund that in turn invests in a qualified business or property, they can defer the tax on that capital gain. That's what this is all about. Steve said fundamentals. What is a capital gain? Capital gain is the difference between an asset's cost, and tax lawyers talk about that in terms of basis, okay? And its selling price, assuming the asset is sold the typo, is sold, not old, at a higher price than it cost. So here's the example that we'll use this afternoon. For example, if an asset costs $1 million in 2015 and is sold for $1.5 million in 2019, the capital gain is $500,000, okay? And so we pay tax on the $500,000. That's the capital gains tax. What the investor is seeking to do, this is the person who just sold that asset, now has $500,000 in capital gains. They're going to get taxed on that capital gain if they don't do something with it. So that investor is going to invest that capital gain into a qualified opportunity fund, the type of fund that Ashley manages. And that qualified opportunity fund is going to invest that money into a qualified opportunity zone business or property. Okay? The investor gets a temporary deferral on paying the capital gains tax on the original asset, that $500,000, a temporary deferral. That's one thing. The second thing the investor gets is a step up in basis of the original asset, and I'll walk you through that. The third thing the investor gets, if they're willing to leave their capital gains that they roll over into a qualified fund, they're willing to leave it in for 10 years, then the capital gain that accrues during the time when that investment is in that fund pays no tax on that gain, okay? So here's the temporary deferral. The deferred gain must be recognized. That's what tax lawyers use the terms of recognize. Any tax lawyers in the room? Okay. Well, there's a tax lawyer right there. The deferred gain must be recognized, meaning taxed, on the date when the fund investment is sold or December 2026, whichever is earlier. Okay? So that's when it's going to get taxed. Step up in basis. This tax law allows after 5 years that the investor will receive a step up in basis of 10% of the deferred gains. Here's the example. You have the original basis of $1 million. A step up of 10% means the basis goes up from $1 million to $1.1 million. And so now the capital gains is only $400,000 as opposed to the $500,000 that we saw before. So if the capital gain is less, $400,000, it's $100,000 less. Now the capital gains tax that you pay after 5 years is less because you're paying tax on the capital gain. So the tax law allows you to make the investment, and if you hold it for 5 years, you see that you're going to pay less capital gains tax. This law also allows if you hold it for 7 years, then there's another step up in basis of 15%. And so the example tracks the same way as the first example. The original basis is $1 million. The step up in basis is $1.15 million. That's the 15% step up. The capital gain is now only $350,000, so you only pay tax on the $350,000. You pay less tax. And the final step up is what I told you earlier. After 10 years, there is no tax on the investment that appreciates while it's in the fund, okay? No tax whatsoever, all right? And that is why this is a program that is talked about fairly wildly. You can imagine that if you have a $500,000 in capital gains and you need to pay tax on it, and if there is truly an investment that you believe in that you can park it into, okay? If you're willing to keep it in there for 10 years, yes, you're going to have to pay by year 2026 at least the 15% step up, but for everything else, you're not going to have to pay any tax on it whatsoever. And that's what drives this. Now, my experience, a lot of people thought originally when the tax law came out that folks who had capital gains were just going to rush to make an investment. My experience is this. Folks who have these types of capital gains that can make a deal work, they also have investment advisors and tax lawyers and a lot of other folks helping them to make their investments, right? And so what they're really looking for, they're not gonna just rush to do an investment in a project just because it's in an opportunity zone. The folk that they hire to advise them still will do their due diligence to determine what is a sound economic investment. And then when they find that, and it's also an opportunity zone, anything that's not is just really not going to compete for reasons that Ashley will describe to you. But that's sort of the fundamentals of the reason for the investment.